Hi, everyone. Once again, it's Dave Mathis of Lessons for Life with another great broadcast. Tonight is going to fit right in with the politics of the day. We're going to have Don Hicks, who's running for a state representative spot, talk to you about basically the ugliness in politics and how he's trying to change things. So, with no further ado, let me introduce to you my personal friend, hopefully Representative Don Hicks. Hi, Don.
Hi, Dave. It's nice to see you. Thank you for having me on this evening.
Well, being real honest with everybody, we are personal friends, and for weeks and months and maybe a year, we've been meeting at Bob Evans' restaurant and just talking politics without ever thinking any one of us would ever be able to be big enough and sharp enough to run for a big position. But Don Hicks has won the primary and he's now on his way to the Michigan State Legislature. Is that correct, Don?
Well, we'll see, Dave. I'd like to think there's a chance that might happen, but one thing at a time. Yes, won the
Well, you won the
primary.
primary by an overwhelming margin, didn't you?
Overwhelming. Yes, I have to check the tally. Yes, 100% of the votes. So running unopposed, landslide victory.
That's pretty great. So we got our first step, but I think you're really going to enjoy Don. Before that, I want to tell you that we met. We're both government teachers, and Don was in a place called Bronson, Michigan. I was in Union City. So tell us how we met. Don, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It's first of all, it was a long while ago. We met up in Lansing at Youth and Government, which is a fabulous organization for kids. They run a mock government in the actual Capitol building. They take over the Senate and House of Representatives there in Lansing.
So you've already been to that. You've already been to the House of Representatives. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right. It'll be a homecoming.
Why do you want to stay more than 1 week? Okay, go ahead.
Right. And then, the thing that really resonated with me, though, that when I thought I like this guy, he's got something to offer here, is that I'm going to say the better part of 25, 26, 27 years ago, you did a conference, and it was over at the Career Center here in Branch County. And the topic of your presentation was incorporating service learning or volunteerism into the classroom. And you even had some seniors making the presentation. They were talking about these wonderful civic projects that they were doing in Union City and the amazing positive reaction that the community had and the wonderful way of giving back to Union City. And I thought, I want to do that as well. And so it was your inspiration that got me going on my own service learning project and requirement for Bronson seniors that lasted for many, many years. And it too paid dividends. So I owe you a debt of gratitude for your great idea.
We're going to get into that as we go along. I want to tell you before I begin that my whole life has been not taking a stand for candidates. Students didn't know if I was Republican or Democrat. This is a change for me. I am a teacher and he's a teacher. We both believe in the same things. And so when he decided to run, I told him I wanted to have him on this program because a Christian running for office is really something I'm interested in. So with that in mind, let's start with your favorite Bible verse.
Thank you. My favorite Bible verse is Matthew 7:12. And it's what all of us know as the golden rule. You do unto others as you would want done unto you. And I believe in it strongly. And it's one of the guideposts for my life. And I think in today's climate, oftentimes that seems to get lost. And nowhere is it more obvious, I suppose, than to take a look at the political landscape and some of the vilification on both sides of the aisle that takes place. And I really want to bring in a new tone a tone
Okay,
of civility and respectfulness.
before you even get into that, we're gonna develop that in a few minutes. I'd like to see the personal side of Don Hicks. I'd like to meet your family. Oh, wait. Let's surprise her. Is your wife close by?
She is. You want to come join us here? Yeah.
Surprise. Bring a chair up. Well, I'm so glad I've been in your house before, so I know you. So I knew if I surprised you that you'd be willing because you are also a retired teacher. Is that correct?
That's true.
Do me a favor before I start. How did you meet this man?
We taught together at Bronson Schools.
Oh, you were a teacher there too?
I was a teacher there.
Did you do any teaching or you spend most of the time in his room?
I taught middle school middle school math actually, and I very much enjoyed it.
Okay, I know we have a picture of your family, and there's so many people in your family. I know Don will get confused. So could you tell us who these people are?
We'll start in the back, left to right. We've got our oldest son, Ben, and then, of course, Don, and then Joe, our youngest son. Moving to the next row forward, we have our oldest daughter, Katie, who is expecting our first grandchild. Next Monday is the due date for that. And then, of course, me, and then our daughter, Abby, who's a senior this year or will be. And then in the very front, we have our middle daughter, Emily.
Are all of them in high school or have some graduated?
Abby is the only one that's in high school. The rest are all employed.
And did I hear you say that right? You're going to be a grandparent in a week?
That's true, in a week.
Yeah, it's exciting times, Dave.
It is. I'm really glad that I didn't set this interview up for next week.
Good call.
I'm going to go on with you, Don. You want to stay there with him, or would you like to?
I'm going to bow out and leave the discussion to you two, but thanks for having me, Dave.
Thanks. I've really enjoyed talking to you and been in your house before, and you're a wonderful woman.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, Don, I want to get back into we were talking before we met your family. You and I have talked about this a lot. We're fed up with the ugliness in politics. It hasn't always been that way, has it? We're older. We've grown up in different eras. You take it from there.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. It wasn't always that way. I think there was a time when public service was respected and admired, and we looked up to our leaders, and particularly in time of crisis, they were there as providing us with fortitude and guidance. And I think that in large part that seems to have gone away, and it makes me sad. And I guess I don't know the origins of it. Certainly you can see the criticisms and the name calling and I used the term earlier, political vilification of one party over another. And it's done from both sides. That's certainly true. But I just would love to see us return to that respectfulness, that civility that I think was more present when you and I were younger. And so I'm going to do my best to try and change that tone. At least I will in my campaign.
You know, we've talked about this before too. It's not only in campaigns, it's in getting legislation passed too, isn't it? You want to comment on that?
Yeah, it really is. And it makes me sad to think that the word compromise, which is what our nation was founded on, it was an essential part of the creation of our Constitution, now almost seems to be a dirty word, because if you compromise, if you work in a bipartisan way with the other party, it's seen as a sign of weakness, as something that's bad. And yet that's what we're founded on. And I just believe that good people can agree to disagree at times without being disagreeable, but also strive to find common ground without saying, oh, but if I do this and I join you, then it might help you or your party. And I think that goes either way. I just want to change that tone.
Admirable. Now, let me ask you a question of how you'd handle. I'll give you a situation, and you tell me how you'd handle it. Let's suppose on the other side of the aisle, you disagree with somebody about a key issue, and you find their position opposite yours. Are you willing to compromise?
Um, that's a tough question, Dave. It's a good one, and it's one that I've contemplated because there's no question that if I were elected, there would be instances where that exact thing would happen. I think you have your core values, and those core values are your guideposts, and they guide you. And it goes to the extent that you are willing to listen to them, to consider them, and to consider your opponent's point of view or the person that disagrees with you. However, there are many things that are in the gray areas, where you have a position, but there's some wiggle room. But you also have your core values, and I don't think you can compromise those core values. Again, you can disagree without being disagreeable, but you have to do what you in your heart believe is right.
I have another. This is an important one to me because you and I are teachers, both of us government teachers. And one thing I believe, and we'll talk about several of them, one thing I believe is by teaching, you run across situations where you're talking to parents, teachers, the principal, and kids, where you have to be able to get along.
Yeah.
Does this help you at all? Does this help you at all in running for office or actually being a representative? Is that experience, has it trained you?
Yes, it really has. It's really teaching opened my eyes. I think sometimes we have a little bit of an egocentric point of view when we're younger, and we think a particular way. And if people don't think like we do, you go, well, what's wrong with you? When I started teaching in Bronson, it's a community very different than the one that I grew up in. I grew up in Mount Pleasant, and that's a college community. And their attitudes and mores and morals were different. So it forced me to take a look at folks and realize that they are coming from a vastly different set of circumstances, and that those circumstances and those experiences have shaped who they are. And with particular reference to your question, man, I would see kids that were really struggling in class. But when you got to know them and you got to know their family situation and realize the circumstances that they were in, boy, it really developed some empathy for them and for their circumstances. And you realized, if I came in the same situation that they are coming in, I would have a very, very different point of view. So humility and empathy is certainly something that teaching taught me, and what I would take with me and do take with me into politics.
Here's another one about teaching. You and I both taught government. And one thing that over our dinners or lunches at Bob Evans we've discussed before is that when it comes to facts, we believe in teaching the facts. And on the other hand, and I hate to criticize this, but I'm going to, most of the people that are in the legislature, the number one occupation is a lawyer. In those cases, in a lot of cases, lawyers tend to look at the facts two ways. Am I saying something that you believe?
I am. I see politicians as having to prosecute a case for their particular point of view. And so when prosecuting a case, you're going to look at evidence and arguments that serve the goal to which you have. And so that's the spin, right? That's the spin zone. And I'm certain that all politicians, to some degree or another, really have to put forth the best argument for their point of view. But I'd also like to be known as a straight shooter and to be honest and forthright with my constituents and with fellow Michiganders. And so when I'm knocking on doors and it's clear that the person I'm speaking to doesn't have the same political viewpoints that I have, again, it's respectfulness, it's civility, it's listening. Sometimes there are points that we can agree on and other points that we don't agree on. But it's being cognizant that their point of view is just as real and authentic to them as mine is to me.
One other thing too, I'd like to at least ask you about is that by being a government teacher, we have spent our entire lives teaching how the Constitution works and how government works. Maybe other people that come to Congress, they bring a lot of things to the table, but they may be more learning how to argue and make their point. We are, I think, a little more conversant on what the Constitution actually says and doesn't say. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, I love learning. And one of the things that I enjoyed most about teaching was learning about the kids and diving into the curriculum. And so you and I get to have very cool conversations about the history of the making of our Constitution and knowledge of the history that's brought us to the point that we're in right now. And I think it does give you a different perspective. And yes, a perspective is most assuredly different than if you were a lawyer and had passed the bar. Your whole goal in your previous vocation was much different than yours and mine was as teaching seniors in high school about civics and government and economics.
And so many things that we have, and again, I'm just following some of our conversations we've had, are about education. And by being in education, we have learned that many of the things that politicians dictate to us have nothing to do with education. Is that correct?
It is. It is. And for me, it really is. The little title underneath there is running a good race. It really is about running a good race, and that has a couple of meanings to it. Of course, the obvious one is running a good campaign where I am respectful. I'm not going to mudsling. I'm not going to engage in any negative campaigning whatsoever. But there's the race of life too. And if we use Jesus as our example, it's really about the journey so that we can go to heaven after we die. So I really like the title that Bob came up with in running a good race. It's what I'm trying to do.
Okay, here's one. I think this gets to the heart of any campaign. Do you know the story of the sheep and the goats?
I do.
It's in Matthew, and I think I told Bob to put a slide up on it. Yeah, I did.
Yep, there it is.
Yeah, just a rough thing is that when Jesus Christ comes back, now this is the Mathis interpretation of it. I'm not reading the Bible, but somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. The sheep are on the right side, the goats are on the left side. And Christ is addressing them in a parable. He tells the sheep that when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick. You captured me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. He ushered the sheep right into heaven. The goats, meanwhile, were a little upset about this. And they said, we never saw you hungry. We never saw those things. And Christ looked at them and said, if you did something for the least of me, you did that for me. I know you're familiar with that. How does that fit into your campaign?
Thank you for that verse. It does fit into the campaign, and it fits into the previous verse that I gave you. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. I think it's incumbent that the focus of politics is making life better for your constituents, moving Michigan forward in a positive way and not putting party over people. It is so uncomfortable for some of us when we see suffering, homelessness, and hunger and addiction. And I suppose the natural human tendency is to want to turn away, because when we see that, I think it reminds us of what we could do and what we should do, but it's not necessarily the most comfortable thing to do, to reach out and to try and lend a helping hand, and to, as a politician, have a safety net for those folks that oftentimes through no choices of their own have had very bad circumstances befall them. But we need to have a policy as a governmental structure that reaches out to those people and lifts them up, but lifts them up in a way that they can become self-sufficient and not just merely dependent. I think that's the devil's oftentimes the detail, but it does speak to me in a profound manner.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. I know, and you know, and when it comes to fundamental questions, a lot of them are on this channel. The one thing they look at is the only thing they look at is what political party you belong to. And the area that we're in is heavily Republican. And Don Hicks is running an uphill campaign because he decided to run Democrat. I didn't tell you that till we got near the end of the program, because he's a Christian Democrat. You want to comment on that at all, Don, why you chose to run Democrat? And what, if any of it was a disadvantage, what's important, the label or your heart?
Well, I don't think the label is important. I would hope that you, when you make your choices, you're voting for the person and not the party. That's how I have always voted, the person and not the party. It was a tough choice. I've been, up until a month and a half ago, I've been an independent. I probably voted, I suppose, more Republican over the years than Democrat. I don't know. I haven't kept very close choice, but I was approached and asked to run, and nobody else was running. And I really believe strongly in a two-party system, and I believe that people should have a choice and that there can be differing visions. I don't think if Jesus were on earth today, he would be a Republican or he would be a Democrat. What's important is to take his teachings and to incorporate it into our lives. Now, our interpretation of his teachings are disparate sometimes, even amongst religious denominations, and I'm sure you know that. I really resist the temptation to invoke politics into the pulpit and into the church. As I may have told you, my grandfather was an Episcopal minister, and he instilled in me at a very young age, when he was visiting parishioners, that you do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And you are empathetic, and you work to understand where people are coming from, and you try to understand them on their level. And I suppose that was the genesis for me running in the first place. The label doesn't matter so much to me, even though I understand that people in the district, it does matter. So I am a dark horse candidate, but I think it's a race worth running and a fight worth fighting. So I'm doing it, and it's been an adventure, Dave.
And like I said earlier, I don't endorse candidates except here, because I know this man's heart and know that he serves Christ first. I'll let you think about that as you hear it. It's not my words. It's Jesus's words, plus you can see Jesus in him. Now, let's suppose somebody wants to get a hold of you or wants to pass out literature or just wants to talk to you. And this is a pretty big audience. Many of them are, even some are overseas. How can they get a hold of you, Don?
Well, I'm ready. I'm available. I respond to everybody that reaches out to me, even if it's not always the nicest things that I hear. I try to keep it positive and keep it upbeat. So it's D Hicks for State Rep, and that's my Facebook page. That's D Hicks for State Rep, and my phone number is scrolling across there: 517-617-0653. You can call me. You can text me. And again, I pride myself in responding to everyone that takes the time to reach out. And on balance, it's been gratifying. I've enjoyed knocking on doors and getting to know people, having conversations and seeing the rich diversity that we have in Hillsdale Branch and part of Lenawee County. It's just a joy. And it's an honor. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work, but I've enjoyed the journey.
This nationwide broadcast is going even over to overseas. So we are in, it's not something all of you can vote for unless you're in southern Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where these counties are. But let's see, I'll say this, whether you are in this district or not, this program is designed to be able to show you that politics doesn't have to be nasty. And it's not the label, it's the man's heart. And you have now seen Don Hicks's heart. And we have enjoyed talking to you, haven't we, Don?
It's been it's been a real joy. Thank you for having me on, Dave. It's been fun getting to talk things out and flesh things out. And it's been just like an extension of some of the lunches that we've had.
It has been. One disadvantage we have in this area is we don't have any TV stations. We don't have many newspapers. Mm-hmm. And so everything goes by word of mouth. So if you know some people in southern Michigan, we'll have this program up and running pretty soon. In fact, it's on Facebook now. Make sure that you send it to some of your friends. Hey, folks, it's been nice talking to you. We're going to say goodnight now. Are you ready, Don, to say goodnight to everybody? 1, 2, 3. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Take care.